Welcome to eLeaderTech TV. I'm your host, Mike Hill. Today's podcast will focus on regulatory compliance. Laws, regulations, policies, procedures, training, auditing. When it comes to dealership regulatory compliance, not knowing what you don't know is a nightmare waiting to happen. Regulatory compliance is complex, and it's a continuous, mandated process. With me today is Mike Tuno, the president of ARMED. All right, again, welcome, Michael. Mike, if you would tell us a little bit about, before we really get into full dealership compliance, and a lot of times we think the compliance just is on the sales side and maybe the finance side, but I think you're going to teach us a little bit different here. But tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about ARMED.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here. ARMED is a company that was formed 6 years ago, but really got its beginning about 30 years ago. It's kind of the newest child in our family, from the experience that I had coming from the retail automobile business in the 80s into the banking business in the 90s, and then on to grad school. I got pulled into a position with a pretty substantial bank that was in automobile leasing, and they were in the acquisition mode of buying banks, and identified some skill sets that I guess they found for me useful, which was auditing some of these bank portfolios to clean them up and to put them on the books in a uniform manner. So ARMED really got started probably in the early 90s, although I would tell you 6 years ago we officially kicked it off, because it was a way for us to deal with the ever-increasing legal challenges our auto dealer friends have faced in the last 10 or 20 years. So, having a retail automotive business background, or, working in a dealership, from then onto a bank and onto a big insurance company for 10 years, and then starting my own agency, it gave me a great deal of insight and skill sets to really pull together a turnkey solution that helps dealers manage their risk across their entire operation, fixed and variable. And so, we always like to say, let the dealer keep the money, not lease the money. This is something that's important because, I don't think dealers wake up each day and go, geez, what new business laws do I need to understand and get out and help my team members understand? I mean, the average dealership in North America has about 80 employees. It's a pretty good size operation. And as laws have changed and come to maturity, some of these have been modified, amended, but many of the challenges dealers face, there wasn't an easy solution for dealers. Back in the agency days 20 years ago, we used to try to teach through PowerPoint and 3-ring binders all the ever-changing legal requirements for every job in the dealership. It was exhausting. It took forever. So we threw technology, we threw a learning management system at all of the content, and we built the framework of that learning management system, proprietary to ARMED, to be in accordance with what the CFPB outlined in 2012 as the definition of a compliance management system. That is oversight of the operation by the board or the owners, that have 4 components: policies and procedures, training, auditing, and a customer complaint module that allows the dealership to document all of the activity in those 4 areas for every job in that dealership. The dealerships have a huge burden to get their arms around the infinite laws that they're faced in every department. And so while you mentioned sales is a big area, and it is, service and parts, accounting, all have their responsibilities here too. And all of it falls on the shoulders of the dealer principal in being responsible for making sure that that business functions in accordance with those laws, and that they can prove it and they can document for it.
Michael, as I talk with dealers, and a lot of times they will mention, well, yeah, I'm concerned about compliance, but
Yeah,
they really, they're concerned, but they're just hoping that everyone is doing the right thing.
that's right. Yeah, they're hoping, they're praying, and I'm not so sure that they're in front of in a proactive versus a reactive way about the subject matter and how they are able to manage all of the moving parts that a dealer has to manage. Listen, we both know for the long period of time we've been involved in the automotive retail industry, there's a lot of moving parts that's on a dealer's desk. And so, again, if I go back to just an NADA average of 80 employees, listen, that's probably in some cases a low number for some dealers. It's probably there's some that are bigger, and the challenge that we have is if we have turnover with those 80 employees, using that as an average, how often do you need to get in front of, a new hire each and every time that we go through, a change in our dealership and change in staffing? Your responsibility doesn't go away, right? And so I know what human nature tends to be in the automotive industry is, we faced a lot of challenges this last year or two, and I think it made us stronger. Right? But I want to be mindful of being proactive at the dealership level and not reactive. And a good example of what that means is in 2000, the year 2000, when the internet was coming into Y2K, and technology was the big hurrah, and tech stocks were the love of Wall Street. The e-Sign Act was adopted into law in 2000. What I find interesting in our industry, it's taken us longer than some of the department stores or the big, the Walmarts or the Lowe's of the world. But you can go in and sign a little pad when you swipe your credit card, right? And you can agree to buy whatever you're buying. It's only been in the recent past that dealers have really gotten on board with bank contracting in a digital environment. And the digital environment's really blossomed in the last 2 years, given the pandemic and everybody's desire to still have a car to be safe in. The dealer's looking to transact, the customer looking to buy. And so this notion of being, more pronounced, the digital experience being more pronounced, required us at ARM to go back 20 years to this law and to kind of reboot it and refresh it and add it to our curriculum, because that's where our industry is at. It's a big shift in the way people were buying cars. Back in the day, frankly, when I sold cars, there was no internet. My start in the car business was answering sales calls because salespeople didn't want to take phone calls. And if someone came in, they wanted a brochure, you gave them a brochure. Well, that's gone. So knowing that the industry continues to morph and there's events around the industry that are challenging to it, it's important at the dealership level, because every department has some level of contracting that's taking place, to be mindful of the requirements of the e-Sign Act. So we brought it back, we rebooted it, and made that part of our training.
Your armed compliance tool is just off the hook. It's fabulous. I've gone through all of the training modules, and you can't do that in a day. It takes a while to go through it, and I love the way it's all set and formatted so that it's actually going to each individual person in a particular department so they can see exactly what it is. And there's no way we could talk about everything that's in that tool right now, but could you give us just a couple of points from maybe different areas of the dealership that as a dealer owner, they need to be aware of and cognizant of? And as I like to, not be reactive, okay, but be proactive.
Yeah, I think that's critical. So an area that I think is going to become if it's not there already, but it should be. Again, back in 2003, the safeguard rule was enacted. We call that Graham-Leach-Bliley 2. Graham-Leach-Bliley 1 was really the privacy notice that many of us are familiar with. It took the FTC 10 years to give us a boilerplate for dealers to use to stay in compliance and get safe harbor by using that boilerplate. Essentially, GLB1 says, we're taking some non-public information from customers. We're using it to transact and do business. And you can either, or we share it or we don't share it with non-affiliates or third parties for marketing purposes. We probably all get those as consumers from our banks or credit card relationships. The dealers are responsible for that. And so this notion of privacy laws or the safeguard rule that got started with GLB1, Graham-Leach-Bliley, Graham-Leach-Bliley 2, which is commonly or synonymously referred to as the safeguard rule, is something that is really important for dealers to be mindful of from a few different angles. The one we see the most often missed is the ability for a dealer to manage its vendor relationship. So in dealerships, there's a lot of third-party, either software companies or third-party vendors with whom they share their customer information. So regardless of where your marketing or your privacy policy points toward the marketing or the use of customer information for marketing, the opt-in, opt-out side of it, right, for GLB1, the safeguard rule requires you to proactively manage your vendors. Do you know them? Do you know how they operate? Do you know what they do with your customer information? Do you know what safeguards they have in place? So in our industry, a couple of years back, I think it was 3 years ago, a company in the Midwest, DMS company called Dealer Built, was compromised, and 100,000 records, compromised dealer records from the DMS provider. I might be light on the 100,000. Just be mindful of one thing. Violations are 10 grand per individual, $100,000 per corporation, times the number of incidences that you violate, right? So the safeguard rule in managing your vendors, in short, means you are responsible as a dealer for that customer information and how your vendors handle it. And if they get compromised, you're going to get dragged into the fight. In addition, I go back to GLB1. On GLB1, on that boilerplate, it's just standard language in the FTC that says you follow federal electronic and procedural safeguards to protect your customers' non-public information that you collect. Standard language. When you don't do that, you now bring up a violation of the safeguard rule, but you also have fraud that starts to bubble up, or UDAP that starts to bubble up, unfair deceptive trade practices. In other words, if you said you do that and you don't, now what happens? So they start to stack in the legal environment, right? So how do I know this? Every single lender agreement I've ever looked at, every single agreement, whether it's a product provider or a vendor coming into that dealership where customer information, motor vehicle information, some customer information resides, does the dealer know anything about their vendors and how they operate? So a best practice is, if you do, there's an addendum that we recommend you sign for each of your vendors, identifying their responsibilities as well as yours, and identifying who's responsible for what. And if you don't, then we have a questionnaire to find out more about their business practices, so you can make a determination as to whether that vendor is going to suit your business very well or not. So what do I mean by that? So a few years back, Target, we all heard about the Target breach, Target, the department store. They were hacked by a HVAC company who was given access to their accounting system. And they went in to Target's technology to post their purchase orders, right, to get paid. And they were breached there, which is a vendor of Target's. I don't know how many millions of people were compromised there. Equifax has the same thing. There was, in fact, my information was compromised. At my age, I've made a decision just to put a credit freeze on my credit bureau. When I need to go get credit, I unfreeze, I unlock it, and I'm in better control of the risk that cybersecurity poses. So this notion of vendor management is not only a paper trail, we call it, but also an electronic, because dealership, believe it or not, whether they want to believe it, I'd like to deny it, but it's not true. They're a technology company. When you look at how much technology goes on in a dealership, in every department, how much time would it take for ransomware or hacking or some type of cyber risk to occur? And so we've again, I go back to what is ARM doing about this so we can help the dealership. We brought in a whole cyber security module in accordance with what the FTC wants to see. In addition to the e-sign act, which is 20 years old, but forgotten. So we'd rather you be mindful of it. Up front, we call it information. On the back end, when you don't know about it, it becomes brain damage, unfortunately. Some things that I think are also important when we talk about this notion of vendor management is it's just not relegated to the sales department. It's just not relegated to the F&I department. Every department in a dealership has some vendor relationship. The accounting department probably has even a cleaning service that comes into that operation. What's out? What's open? What's not secured? Because if you say you secure customer files and doors and drawers and computers are left wide open, what do you know about that cleaning service? A few years back, we were doing some audit work, which is kind of a specialty we do from time to time, where we found out that the cleaning service came in and the DMS was wide open. So you could certainly get access to that. None of the customer deal jackets were locked. All the customer paperwork was sitting on title clerks' desks, the accounting desks. Employee records were left open. So, when you look at that, and we asked, well, geez, what do you have in terms of a contract with these folks? Well, what protection do you have against a cleaning person that owner hired coming in and going into business for themselves? Doesn't take much. We found out they didn't. They actually had a $2,500 bond for employee dishonesty. What's $2,500 do for you? Nothing. So again, every department's going to touch this in a dealership. The safeguard rule has lots of tentacles. It's important to get a chief compliance officer named, which again goes back to your earlier question, which, what do we see out there touching every part of the dealership? The lack of a CCO, the chief compliance officer, or chief information officer, or someone in charge to coordinate all this. At ARM, we make it easy. We give you a virtual compliance manager. We trademarked it. We copyrighted it. What does it mean? It means that we do all the heavy lifting. We throw content, we throw technology, and we need someone on the point to pay attention in the dealership for the dealer's best interest. That can be the virtual compliance manager or someone in charge at the dealership. Trying to find someone that a dealer is willing to pay the right money for, that has that subject matter expertise, and to work there are like finding unicorns. So we reduced the need to try to find that talent, and through technology and experience at it with ARM's virtual compliance manager to help the dealership manage all those moving parts.
We're not here to scare anyone, but I'm sure there are a lot of
telling the truth.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of dealers out there that are just so overwhelmed with all of it. And So they
Don't
change. They
disagree.
just tend to ignore it.
That's right.
What are they doing when they ignore that? What kind of what's going to happen? What's the
Nothing good.
potentials there?
Nothing good. So not only do you have the underlying violation of the law, but you also have fraud or unfair and deceptive practices, because not knowing what the law is, there's no excuse for not following the law, right? You know, one trend that we get nervous about is holding employees personally liable at the dealership level for some of these violations. You know, a corporate veil is there to protect you as a person from the business risk. And some plaintiff attorneys are trying to pierce that, saying that your behavior was demonstrating a flagrant violation of the law. We're going to drag you into it. Listen, even if they're wrong, you're going to get dragged into it. It's going to be a mess, a stain on your reputation, your brand. Really? So I think that's a concerning trend that we're seeing with some cases that have bubbled up around the country. We decided that we wanted to help the dealer in these last couple of years, trying to stay ahead of the curve, as DealerRater and Google have been the court of law for the consumer. You know, the consumer may be disgruntled about something, so they go online and they post their thoughts or emotions. And now the dealer's on its heels trying to defend itself. You can see it clearly in the thread of the response, right? The problem with that is regulators use that the same way. They look at it as a pattern of behavior. So we built the consumer complaint module that allows for a dealer to identify what the issue is and not only manage Google and DealerRater more proactively, but also to bring that back inside the store and take corrective steps and document those corrective steps and additional training, change in policies, procedures, whatever it might be, so that they're proactive. So the regulators want to see all this stuff resolved in 15 days, and we set our tolerance with technology to 14 days. And you get reminders from the beginning of that complaint getting registered in our system to get it done. And if it doesn't, then it gets escalated to senior management. But, you know, and we separated duties out here. Listen, we gave the dealer the choice. You can register a complaint, but I'd be really cautious to have the fox in the hen house, so to speak. If you're going to register a complaint, are you also going to give that same person the responsibility or authority to resolve it? We like the check and balance of being really two people involved in this. Someone that can initiate it might be a department head, and then a chief compliance or a information officer, really to manage the resolution of that to the satisfaction of the dealer. We have some stores where that dealer is the only one resolving that. They look at that, they identify it, they get a hold of the department head, they get what they need, and they resolve it because they're on the line for it, the dealer.
Mike, you brought up some very, very concerning and great points here. And I know as dealers see this podcast, they're going to be asking me some more questions. And so would you be willing to come back and talk to us a little bit more?
Yeah, I would. Sure. You know, it's a passion of ours. We want to help our dealer friends defend themselves in a landscape that's very difficult. We know that. So we always want to do the right thing, and we always want to tell the truth, because that's the easiest way for us to solve all the issues that are in front of us, right? Transparency will be helpful to many dealers to continue to grow their bottom line with their customers. Can't emphasize that enough. And identifying these key areas of compliance that everyone can embrace at the dealership level really is just a great message that's sent to the community that dealer cares.
Well, Thank you very much, Mike. And thank you for taking time out of, I know, a very, very busy day that you
You're
have.
welcome.
And I look
Been a
forward to
busy
talking to you
year.
again soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. For more information about this subject, please email me at mhill@ibginc.com or just give me a call at 801-440-7839. Thank you for listening.